Please welcome Dominic Frisby.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Jeremy, and thank you very much to Cheviot and to Ned for putting this fantastic event on. And I'd also like to say thank you very much to James Turk down there. It was your book that first put me onto gold, The Collapse of the Dollar, or as it was then called, The Coming Collapse of the Dollar. And I am forever in your debt for having written that book. So thank you very much, James. And I think some of you will know me, some of you won't know me. For those of you that don't know me, as well as writing for Money Week and presenting a podcast, I'm also a stand-up comedian. If any of you have seen the Catherine Tate Show, or this new series, The In-Betweeners, or The Fast Show, so have I. And I thought they were really good. And people kind of expect you, because you're a comedian, to come and do jokes, but I suppose my opening joke today is the modern system of money, banking and credit. It impoverishes and enslaves. This essay, this talk was taken from an essay I wrote for a magazine called The Idler, which is a movement which is promoting the art of achieving more by doing less. And I recommend you all familiarise yourselves with it. The modern system of money, banking and credit, it impoverishes and enslaves. It's made wars that should never have happened possible. It's brought about a relentless, needless commercial expansion and malinvestment that has raped the earth. And in this essay, I plan to consider some of the benefits of doing away with the modern system of money and using gold as money once again. Ezra Pound, the poet, once said, "In our time, the curse is monetary illiteracy, just as an inability to read plain print was the curse of earlier centuries. It's amazing how few people understand the modern system of money, how it works, and how it's to blame for the huge inequality of wealth we see around us in the world today." So I'm going to start off with a quick history of money. It'll be slightly different to James's. First, we had commodity money, shells, cocoa beans, various metals, even feathers were used as money. At one stage, Roman soldiers, as I'm sure you know, were paid in salt, from where we derived the word salary. And the most widely used forms of commodity money were, of course, metals, gold and silver, and for smaller transactions, copper and nickel. And indeed, as I'm sure you know, the words money and silver are interchangeable in, I think it's 90 or more different languages, argent in French, plata in Spanish, and so on. Coins were cast in order to certify weight and purity of the metal, and thus to facilitate trade. The names of most modern currencies usually derive from a unit of weight. £1 sterling, of course, meant a pound of sterling silver. Lira meant the same. Once the currency of Italy, the currencies of Turkey, Lebanon, Syria and Jordan are also known as lira. A French franc was a livre. The Spanish peseta, the South American peso are all units of weight. The Arabic dirham was also a unit of weight, known to the Romans as a drachm, which is a derivation of the Greek drachma, which means a handful. The dollar, the word the dollar, derives from the word taler, which is spelt T-H-A-L-E-R, an ounce weight of silver originally coined by one Count Schlick in the 16th century. Even the Thai baht is a unit of weight. The Chinese yuan and the Japanese yen both mean round shape, referring, of course, to the shape of coins. The Scandinavian krona refers to the crown, the issuer's stamp. The German mark and the French franc were also words that denote the authenticity of the issuer and thus the metal content of the coin. And the Dutch guilder simply means golden. From commodity money, we went to representative. People would store their gold and silver in vaults, and the keeper, a smith of some kind, would issue a certificate as receipt. And people began to use these certificates in the marketplace as if they were gold itself. and governments issued such notes. They began doing this, as James said, in 1694, the Bank of England, and in the case of the pound, it was considered as good as gold. So world trade moved from world money had moved from commodity to representative. Now, gradually, one of the, in inverted commas, frauds of modern banking crept in. Goldsmiths, now effectively bankers, began lending out certificates against depositors' gold, and the goldsmith would pay one rate to depositors and then lend at a higher rate. And then, of course, banks began lending out many times the amount of gold they had on deposit. And it would have been straightforward to outlaw this new lending practice, but the large volumes of credit it created made European expansion, European commercial expansion, indeed much of the Industrial Revolution possible. And so the practice was legalized and regulated, and the monetary system had moved from representative to debt. But limits on the amount of money that could be lent out were agreed, limits still much larger than the amount of gold and silver on deposit. And usually that ratio was 9 units loaned to 1 actual unit in gold. And by the 20th century, this fractional reserve system, where you only need hold a fraction of the money you lend out, became the dominant money system of the world. But simultaneously, another, more ominous problem was developing. The amount of gold backing the paper steadily shrank. The British came off the gold standard in 1914 because they needed to print money to pay for World War I. So did the Germans. The US devalued in the 1930s, and by 1944, only the USA and Switzerland were the only major nations left with a currency backed by gold. And with the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944, which established monetary order between the major industrial countries at the end of World War II, the dollar became the global reserve currency, pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. I'm speeding through this because I know most of you know it all, but I just need to put it all in context. Throughout the 60s, President Johnson and then Nixon allowed many more dollars to be issued or printed than they had gold to back them. They needed to pay, or America needed to pay, for its new expensive welfare systems and for the war in Vietnam. And eventually, in 1971, under a French-led run on the dollar and faced with the rising cost of the Vietnam War, President Nixon removed the dollar from the gold standard altogether. And so from 1971, for the first time in history, with the exception of the Swiss franc, no currency on the planet, nor any small fraction of any currency, was backed by anything tangible. The basic nature of money had changed once again. We were now in an era where money is money by fiat. That means by government edict, by the law. That is all. The dollar, the euro, the pound are all government fiat currencies. Fiat's a Latin word meaning let it be. In the past, people had the choice to refuse privately created bank credit notes, but now legal tender laws declared that citizens must accept this government edict money or fiat currency as payment. And taxes must be paid in this money. And without that legal backing, your pound or your computer digit that represents your pound note would be pretty much meaningless. And since that fateful day in 1971, debt has grown exponentially, and there's been nothing to stop it. We've seen the formation of the greatest credit bubble in history, and it's brought with it the greatest rape of the earth, the longest working hours, the greatest divides between rich and poor, the greatest slavery, the worst working conditions, the greatest expansion of government, the highest divorce rates, the highest crime rates, the most wars, the greatest frauds, and so on. And I really believe it is no coincidence. Only the government has the power to issue fiat money, but banks can also create it through lending. If somebody wants to borrow $10, a bank can create it from nowhere and lend it out, even if they don't have the reserves. If they don't have the reserves, they just need to go into the interbank lending market and borrow it at a much cheaper rate than they lend it out. Banks can also create money by lending against an asset, such as a house. Who benefits from this system? Those closest to the money's issuance. Those that have the power to issue money, governments and banks. They haven't had to do anything productive, they've just created money. And however money is created, be it through lending, fractional reserve banking, financial bailouts, or just old-fashioned printing, banks are always at or near the top of the money issuing pyramid. Next, you have corporations who borrow large sums. Those on lucrative government contracts for new ventures, particularly overseas, banks' associate companies and partners, those who borrow early and at low rates, and the bank's senior employees. They all quickly get their share of the pie. In some cases, it'll come in the form of bonuses. Those companies and individuals that get this money early can go out and spend it before the prices of the things they want to buy have risen to reflect the new money in circulation. In other words, they get services, products, assets cheap. But prices inevitably rise, so holders of assets such as houses or shares will then see gains without there necessarily being any improvements to the company or the house in question. Often this will lead to speculative bubbles. But what about those at the bottom of the pyramid? Those on fixed wages or incomes, those who live in remote areas, or those with savings? By the time this newly created money has filtered down to them, the prices of the things they want to buy have increased, their savings buy them less, and their wages remain largely unchanged. In many cases, they take on debt just to be able to buy the things they were previously able to afford, which means they have to go to the banks. So in reality, this process of creating money under a fiat system only redistributes wealth from the bottom to the top of the pyramid, and thus that ever-increasing gulf between rich and poor gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Is it any wonder the financial sector of our economy has grown so disproportionately large? With gold as money, such expansion would never have been possible because there would not have been the gold to pay for it. With modern money that can be endlessly issued, there was no such restriction. Expansion of debt can't go on forever. Bubbles pop. I think we've reached peak debt. As Winston Churchill put it, all previous attempts to base money solely on intangibles, such as credit or government edict or fiat, have ended in inflationary panic and disaster. George Bernard Shaw once said, "You have to choose, as a voter, between trusting to the natural stability of gold and the natural stability of governments. I advise you, as long as the capitalist system lasts, to vote for gold." So let's look now at why we should vote for gold. Money has two uses. One is to be a medium of exchange, two, to be a store of wealth. A successful form of money, therefore, must have two qualities. It must firstly be portable, and secondly, have a purchasing power that lasts, so it can be used at a later stage. Enough people have to believe in the money for it to function properly. And as long as it has these qualities, money can, in theory, be virtually anything. Now, gold's rarity gives it value. A huge amount of worth can be stored in a single gold coin. Silver, being less rare and thus less valuable, had more use in day-to-day transactions. But we've seen that over time, people preferred the ease of paper money to gold and now digital money. So gold, although being portable and infinitely more beautiful than paper or digital money, was eventually bettered in the first necessity of money, which is to be portable. But this drawback is no longer the case. Now, thanks to James and others, we have digital gold and silver and platinum and palladium, and gold is stored in vaults, and ownership of that gold can be transferred digitally, just as debit cards work today. Money's other function is to be a store of wealth. Spandau Ballet sing, "Gold, you're indestructible," and indeed, gold is immutable. It doesn't tarnish. As the recent discoverers of Iceni gold buried in Norfolk found to their delight, you can dig up a gold coin buried in the ground 1,000 years ago, and it'll be more or less intact, unoxidized and unblemished. And just as gold lasts over time, so does its purchasing power. Gold buys you as much clothing, as much bread, as much meat, as much energy as it did 50, 500 or 5,000 years ago. And you compare that with the modern pound or the dollar, which buys you less and less each year. And it's the falling purchasing power of modern money that breeds this culture of spending and speculation just to keep up. Now, if you've ever handled gold bullion, you'll vouch for this. Gold's not only beautiful, it has an indefinable, magical, captivating power. It is real money, tangible wealth. And the image of the old miser counting his gold was, in my view, a PR stunt wrought by the same people who today tell you to go shopping, to buy things you don't need with money you don't have, and persuade you that somehow this will make you happy and save the economy. Nobody gets rich by spending money they don't have. The way forward is to go back to a culture of real production, not redistribution, growing stuff, mining stuff, making stuff, rather than consuming it, and we'll be happier. True satisfaction comes through production, not through consumption. As we all know, apart from a few rare industrial applications, electronic applications, gold has virtually no industrial use whatsoever. As a result, almost all of the gold that's ever been mined remains in existence. Today, its only use is as a means of storing wealth, as a money. A lot of environmentalists rightly despise gold miners because of the damage they do to the surroundings and to workers, but practices have vastly improved, and the damage done by gold miners is nothing compared to the rape of the earth that has been caused by the endless expansion of debt and the malinvestment it creates. Governments are at best incompetent and at worst corrupt. Their role should be to organise essential services such as rubbish collection and no more, if indeed they should even be doing that. They should not be in charge of money and its creation. It gives them too much power. There's the famous Rothschild quote, "Give me control of a nation's money and I care not who makes its laws." Look what they've done with that power, from wars to intergenerational welfare state dependence. And the same goes for banks. Look what banks have done with their power. The best way to stop the misuse of power is to spread it as widely and equally as possible. We must take away from governments and banks the power to create money. Government's response to this current system has been to bail out the banking system, the car industry, anything they can. Companies that have acted irresponsibly should be allowed to go bust. It may be painful, but the hole they leave will quickly be filled by another company that has behaved responsibly and prudently. I don't know if you know this, governments have already spent, and even in inflation-adjusted terms, many times more than was spent on the whole of World War II. Where's that money come from, many are asking? And the money is effectively, as Congressman Ron Paul is so fond of saying, has been created out of thin air. And the only reason this hasn't resulted in global Zimbabwe-style hyperinflation is that governments haven't been able to print as fast as credit has contracted, and people still trust our system of money. There's still that, hyperinflation is very much a psychological phenomenon as well. But many argue that hyperinflation will come. I'm not sure, but I've no doubt that it's possible. By printing more money, governments are effectively destroying it. What right does a government have to destroy what you have earned? The amount of gold in circulation is limited by the amounts newly mined. There is no such limit on unbacked modern money, be it pounds, dollars or euros. Now, I want you to imagine a world now where both at national and personal level you can only spend what you had and you didn't have the power to print money. And once you've spent the money, it's gone. All these ridiculous government spending programs would disappear instantly. Neither the US nor the UK would be able to pay for its, some would say, illegal war in Iraq, nor would our own government be able to bail out the banking system or waste money in any of the innumerable ways it's found to blow it. Efficiency and competence would suddenly become essential. Waste would become less possible. And if you look back, World War I could never have happened. Neither the British nor the Germans had the gold to pay for it. We both came off the gold standard to print the money. The subsequent German reparations, which gave rise to Weimar hyperinflation and then to Hitler, would never have happened. The endless expansion of debt and its enslavement of millions would never have happened. I can go on ad infinitum. All these horrendous crimes that are committed in the name of law and order, from fascism through political correctness to war, would just not be possible. But the current system of money imposes no such discipline. People are blaming the free market for the current economic woes, but it's not a free market while the issuance of money remains in the hands of governments and banks. It's only a free market when you have a free money, beyond the control of any body of people. There are calls for more regulation. We have enough regulation already. We don't need any more. It's just a further attack on freedom and taking us on the road to serfdom and totalitarianism. Regulation absolves people of moral and individual responsibility. With regulation, you can say, we were only obeying orders. At present, deficits don't seem to matter. Governments can print what they like, they can spend what they like, and that means they have almost unlimited power. Professor Walter E. Sparr, who was chairman of the Department of Economics at NYU from 1927 to 1956, sums it up. What is the meaning of a gold standard and a redeemable currency? It represents integrity. It ensures the people's control over the government's use of the public purse. It is the best guarantee against the socialization of a nation. It enables a people to keep the government and banks in check. It prevents currency expansion from getting even farther out of bounds until it becomes worthless. It tends to force standards of honesty on government and bank officials. It is the symbol of a free society and an honourable government. It is a necessary prerequisite to economic health. It is the first economic bulwark of free men. Anyone can mint gold. Anyone can issue gold receipts. With gold, control of the money is taken away from governments and banks. Gold is true, it's incorruptible, you can't print it, it is a rare, useless, inanimate object, but it is constant, immutable, and nobody else's liability. It imposes a discipline on people, on institutions and governments, which mean they can't spend money recklessly. It's a restrictive monetary system, but it's a fair, free, and honest system. It all starts with money, values, morals, behaviour, ambitions, manners, everything. Money must be sound and true. At the moment, it is neither, and society is corrupt as a consequence. As Dorothy is repeatedly advised in The Wizard of Oz, which is an allegory about the monetary system and the fraud that is the dollar, the Emerald City, the time has come once again to follow the yellow brick road. Thank you.